Hypervigilance allows officers to stay aware and safe on the job. As an officer or spouse, you may be aware or have a general understanding of hypervigilance. You may even understand that what goes up must come down. Sadly, that single biological process that keeps our officers safe can spill over like a tsunami in our relationships. We need to be aware of how it shows up and notice it to make changes. Today, I'm talking with one of my most favorite guests, Garrett TeSlaa, who is an active law enforcement officer and host of the very popular Squad Room podcast. We talk about the impact of hypervigilance on the family and the impact he's making on officers and their families. Stay tuned. You're listening to the Code 4 Couples podcast.
Welcome to the Code 4 Couples podcast, focusing on topics for law enforcement officers and couples to keep you and your relationship connected, resilient, and Code 4. Now, your host, law enforcement expert Cindy Doyle, author of Hold the Line and My Wife.
Hey there, welcome back to Code 4 Couples. I am your host, Cindy Doyle, and today I have the infamous, notorious Garrett TeSlaa on, who I love having on because when he and I have conversations, they just flow really well. If you don't know about Garrett, he hosts his own podcast and still works full-time, I think. He's making a face like, yep. So I'm going to let Garrett introduce himself a little bit and let you tell him why I keep having him on the podcast. Garrett, thank you so much for coming back on. Tell everybody a little bit about you and what all you are doing and do.
Thanks, Cindy. I love coming on your show because I feel so warm and fuzzy after all your introductions. It's always an ego boost. Thank you. Yes, my name is Garrett TeSlaa. I host the Squad Room podcast. I've been doing that for, almost 10 years now, if you can believe that.
That's crazy.
I can't believe it, but nonetheless, time does continue to move on. So it's been 10 years. Yes, still active duty. I'm a lieutenant for a sheriff's office in Southern California. I've been on the job close to 20 years now. Speaking of time and how that moves, done a lot of assignments throughout the agency, as you would expect. And, still in it. Got young. I said young, but my kids are growing up. They're now teens and preteens.
Yeah.
A lot of that going on. And what I typically tell people as part of me, I often share my own personal mission statement, which is that I am building a world where first responders wake up inspired, feel confident at work, and go home safe knowing they've spent their time in a worthy cause. And so that's my mission in life. That's why I do the podcast. That's why I jump on with you. That's why I create some of the things that I've created that we'll talk about today, and just excited to be here to talk about it.
I'm so excited too. If you want to know more about Garrett, in the show notes, you can go to the show notes and I will link the two other podcasts that we have done. One of them is definitely more like 101, where we started with our very first podcast together. The other one is a retreat that he offered along with partnering with, I forgot his name. And I know that he has a podcast too. Are y'all doing that again?
We are. November, Veterans Weekend of November, we're taking veterans and first responders out into the woods outside Denver, Colorado, about 10,000 feet up. And we're going to do a full weekend with them again. It was amazing. I
actually heard about it. And I told you this, but I'll tell y'all this, that I had a firefighter in my office and he was telling me, oh yeah, one of my friends went on this retreat, yada, 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 was talking about it. I went, wait, hold on. Was it this retreat? He's like, yeah. I'm like, did he hear about it on my podcast or did he hear about it? So he heard it on, I don't think it was my podcast, but it was somebody's. But he had nothing but positive things to say about that retreat. So if y'all are interested in going out in the woods and having a little renewal, just kind of getting away with other first responders and being able to talk about some of the hard stuff, I know that retreat was amazing. And so check it out. I'll make sure to include it in my social media and link it as well.
That's awesome to hear. Yeah, thank you. We had such a huge weekend with a bunch of. This was a men's retreat, so it was all men, and but just seeing how sorely community was needed, communities watching first responders just make eye contact with each other and connect was such a powerful moment because what we got out of that weekend was so many men were saying, like, I didn't know how much I needed this, right? I didn't know how much I needed the connection. I didn't know how much I needed to take a breath to learn to kind of like go inward and dig deeper into what they were struggling with on that daily basis. And it was out of that event and some other things that I have done where I just kept being reminded of how we in the first responder communities lack the ability to connect with other first responders. You know, we use words like brother and sister interchangeably with partner and coworker, but do we really treat each other as brother and sister in the way that we would hope we do? And that's often not the case, right? So we can't rely on our partners at our agencies often to be honest and open. Stigma still exists around just talking about feelings, much less going to therapy or coming into your office or picking up the phone to call you, right? Like just acknowledging pain or trauma or relationship difficulties, like parenting difficulties. So many of those things we hold up inside ourselves because we think we can't talk about it. And that's wrong, right? And so part of this mission is to break that stigma.
And there's so much power, I think, in being able to come to a place like that where nobody knows you and you don't have to worry about going home and having, like, I call it a vulnerability hangover, but kind of having that hangover of being open and sharing. You can just go home and know that, like, that was a safe place and go and maybe form some new connections as opposed to doing something with a counselor or doing something with somebody in your own department. I just think it's a great idea. And I think you saw a hole. I think you do really well at that, at finding gaps and filling them. So
we're already going off track, right? But no, here, this was amazing. I want to share this and then we'll jump to actually what we're here for, right? But so at that retreat, 4 of the guys ended up knowing each other. And I'm sitting there as a facilitator going, ooh, this could go sideways, right? But what ended up happening is they saw someone that they knew and then they felt safe because they're like, oh, you're like me too. And it's not like we're damaged and all those things, but like, oh, you're here and you're willing to do the work. You're willing to put in the effort towards self-development. And they continued it after they left.
That's
right?
awesome.
And so they're like, oh, I got a cohort. I got some people around me to support me. And they brought that home with them. So we fear that we can't be around our people. But once we kind of open that door and allow people to see who we are, people invite us in, right? So I just wanted to share that because I thought that was really fascinating.
No, it is because, yes, we'll just leave it there. It's awesome. Let's get into what we were going to talk about, which is we were talking about, well, you were mentioning hypervigilance in relationships and how that shows up. I know from what I do that it can show up, like spouses many times and families misinterpret it. From an officer perspective, what do you see? What are kind of ways that hypervigilance shows up and impacts?
So I think the important thing about hypervigilance is that, first off, we have to understand that it's vital to the job, right? So like when we're at work, we have to be hypervigilant. And
Absolutely.
So we are in one of the unique careers, and I would say even the military doesn't experience this, where you're going into a hypervigilant state on purpose. And for hypervigilance, for people who, you know, as a basic level, that's activation of your sympathetic nervous system. Your fight or flight hormones are dumping into your body because you're on duty and you're looking for threats and you're looking to protect yourself and your safety and everyone around you. But then we come home, right? And there's an equal and opposite reaction to that. And we go into that hypoarousal state of low energy, memory fog, being isolated from people or socially distant, or even in our close relationships. And when you go through a career that yo-yoing back and forth, you eventually get stuck, typically in the hypervigilant state. So we're bringing it home with us, even though we need it on duty, right? And so what I think is important for people to understand is that we bring it home. And then when we bring that home in that hypervigilant state, we are affecting our spouses and we're activating a hypervigilant state in them as well, right? And so we come home either, and just through a career of this stuff too, right? We kind of off gas a lot of that hypervigilance into our kids. I saw it in my own kids and into our spouses where they may not realize they're in a hypervigilant state. And I think one of the big conflicts we see in relationships, and this is just a theory of my own, I'd love your input on this, is that we're hypervigilant at work. When we come home, we crash. And we end up in that hypoarousal state. So now we're hypoarousal. And now the spouse is reacting to our hyperarousal when feeling a threat. They're feeling unsafe or they're not in control because we're isolated, we're quiet, maybe we're low energy. And so they're actually in a hypervigilant state. So we're almost like yo-yoing in opposite directions, right? And then we go to work and they calm down maybe. And so I think there's a lot of tension there.
That would be my knowing laughter. Yes.
He's gone, like, you know, he can relax. There's not that tension in the house anymore. He's not always trying to control everything. He's, you know, and then as the end of shift approaches, spouses probably start to ramp that up again, right? And they feel that tension building. And then now they're in a hypervigilant state. And so that's the challenge, of course, in relationships is figuring out how to navigate that stuff.
Yeah, I think that I would say you're spot on with a lot of that in the sense that I had never thought of it as like his hypoarousal would cause hyperarousal. And because what I think about is the biological process around hypervigilance. And so as a spouse, would I say that I was hypervigilant? I might have been vigilant, but maybe not hypervigilant. I might have felt like I was walking on eggshells at times. So why? Why is that? Because in the hypoarousal, right, if we're going to go biology, like you're saying, the prefrontal cortex, the thinking center of your brain is shut off. And so officers are a little bit more touchy. I don't want to say fragile, but it's like if you touch the skin, it's like, ow, right? There's not that moderation of the response. And so I think because of that, many times we, as spouses or the family I would say conditioned. They're conditioned to walk on eggshells because we're not sure what we're getting when we get home. And so it is a bad cycle. And that's what I think you and I are both trying to fight is that cycle so we can have more resilience and officers can be healthier and safer and all those kinds of things. And relationships are a big part of that. And when families don't understand that that's what's coming home, it's not good. Well, right? It's damaging, toxic, potentially. And then I think also the other part that's probably very unintentional is that when you find out like the people that you want to keep safe the most are being impacted in this negative way, I think there's hurt and pain there. It's like, dang it, I'm bringing this home and you're the people that I want to keep safe and you're being impacted and you're scared of me. Like that doesn't feel good. So,
It felt awful. And just to be completely upfront, like I remember those moments and, you don't get there overnight. I think the biology is helpful for people to understand, right? Because it is that your prefrontal cortex, which makes your decisions and helps you kind of like put a brake on your reaction to things is basically, like you said, shut off. And your amygdala, it's actually called the amygdala hijack, right? Because that fight or flight, fawn or freeze response is what goes. So like you said, we're touchy. We're like touching hot skin and we don't even realize we're reacting instead of responding. Mm-hmm. We're reacting immediately with impulsivity. Mm-hmm. And we're bringing it home. We're hurting the people around us, the people we want to protect. And we think, I know this is straight from my own perspective, with 20 years, it took me a long time to see it. We think we need to be in control because control means safety, right? And we control a crime scene, we control an accident scene, we do those things to keep us and our partners in the public safe.
Right.
We bring that same idea home that we have to control everything, and then we rule our house sometimes with an iron fist, or we discipline our kids with white knuckle grip, and then we see it. I vividly remember when my daughter was probably, 5, in an argument with her, and I'm red-faced yelling because she's too much like me, right? And we're just going at it. Right. And I was so, I realized in that moment, like, what are you doing? Like, you're yelling at a 5-year-old. And it was one of those defining moments for me that was thankfully that like happened in a way that I was able to shift, right? Mm-hmm, like, this is not how I want to be. This is not who I want to be. But that shame and guilt, that's heavy. That came in spades after that, right?
Right. And there's that part, like we're talking about all of this biological conditioning that comes with it, right? So getting control, like you said, oh, I don't have control. I've got to get safe. And so your body reacts. Nobody tells you about how to deal with the emotional impact, though. Nobody, like the shame that you just mentioned, guilt and shame. And I think about that when I'm talking to people too. And we do mention the shame as a part of it because it's like I'm failing, another shame word, right? And so I've now failed in these relationships that are so important to me. The spillover is just like, it's hard, right? When you think about that spillover of hypervigilance and the emotional aspects of it, it's painful.
Yeah. I think, it's so painful. And if someone's having a hard time connecting the dots between work and home, I think what is helpful sometimes is you think, like I said, vigilance is a job requirement. We have to do it.
Absolutely. Yes.
But vigilance over time in the improper context, you're sitting at home, you're at a very nice restaurant where no one's going to bust through the door. Those things become cynicism, right? So vigilance is required, but it becomes cynicism. Then you associate cynicism or being cynical with being safe, right? And then that cynicism is what becomes our personality because we are so wrapped around the axle of needing everything to be safe and to be in control because we experience so many situations where there's chaos, where it's out of control and it's our job to fix it. It's our job to get it in control. And the only way we're ever safe is when we're in control.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And because control takes care of so much. I mean, it does, right, on the job. But then when you're looking at your personal relationships, the last thing you want is really this control. Unfortunately, I'm tying a bunch of things together in my head. I got an email from somebody in the field who he's like a cop doc kind of person. And he said, what do y'all think about this 40% statistic from 1991, right, with domestic violence? And unfortunately, we look at control or what's called coercive control. And it's many times it's unintentional, but the interpretation at home can be dangerous too. And it can move into a dangerous situation. So being aware of that and determining, like really self-assessing, I think. I don't know if, I know you probably practice a lot of self-assessment, but kind of looking inward and figuring out, okay, what do I need to do? Am I showing up in the way that I want to be? But just hypervigilance in itself and the mindset that goes along that spills over can impact in so many different ways. I don't want to leave people with like, this is horrible, you're all doomed.
Well, yeah, no, they're not. Absolutely not. And to that point you just touched on, for me, learning how to create intention about who I wanted to be as a father and a parent and a husband was a key part of my own process and development out of that. Right. Yes. And so there are absolutely ways out of it. I can confidently say that with rare exception, I'm able to recognize it, tap into it, and address it internally. Like you said, but I like nerd out on this stuff. I love self-assessments. I love self-development. And I'm on this path. The podcast has been around 10 years because I realized I needed to make changes. And then, wanted to talk to experts about these things and then also share what I was learning because I know for a fact that I wasn't the only one going through it or wasn't the only one struggling with it. But if someone can just start to begin with that basic of who do I want to be when I get home, that will create some distance between who you are at work and you start to recognize, the disparity there a little bit. But yeah, no, this is not something we're not stuck with this at all.
No, absolutely not. Yeah. When you think of other aspects of the spillover, were there other things that you wanted to mention as far as that? Because I know we could go really deep there, but then I know we also have some other things we wanted to talk about too.
I just, it just shows up in so many different ways. And so just real briefly, like, social isolation, we stopped going to the backyard barbecues because we don't want to interact. When you go out to eat, I touched on it a second ago, but how many cops, they got to sit with their back to the wall with an eye on the front door. And every time the little bell over the front door of the restaurant dings, they break contact with their spouse in the conversation and they look to the door. They look and see who's coming in. They can't let someone walk by the table without watching their hands, right? Those are all indications that you're not protecting your family. You're in a hypervigilance state, right?
Yes.
And
right.
So it shows up in these goofy, weird ways. And it shows up with this feeling of threats all around you. It feels a threat, like one of my moments was in the car with my wife. It had rained and everyone else was driving, but I was in the passenger seat, and out of nowhere, I kind of panicked because I wasn't in control of the car, because I was certain someone was going to wash out, hydroplane, crash into us, change lanes into us. I had no reason to think that, and my wife's a fine driver, but I wasn't in control in that moment. And I'm white knuckling the grip handle above the seat, and I got my other hand on the dashboard. I'm like, what is going on?
Yeah.
And so it shows up in really physical ways like that too, right? Like I said, it makes us more suspicious and cynical of people, even people who want us to succeed in life. And so we just got to find ways to work around it. And there's plenty of ways to do it.
And I think, once again, it's also important that that mindset and the biological process is something that, as a spouse, I'll speak as the spouse side, but as a spouse or as people that love our officers, we want that because we want you to be able to come home. And there's a balance there. And it's hard to get your brain, once it's learned something, it's hard to get your brain to be like, just put that to bed right now. Let's just pretend that that's not scary, which is why psychology all around it, right? The psychology of the brain and those neural pathways get reinforced by what you're doing on the job. And so it's important to increase those neural pathways in a different way. And right? Because it'd be like using your right arm over and over again and never using your left arm. That's how I think of it.
Yeah,
you're
that's a
simple.
Right. I'm going to have a really big muscle on my right arm and my left arm is going to be weak. And so really finding a way to balance those out is helpful. So so I'm curious, what did you do in that moment of the passenger seat in the car, knowing that my wife's a fine driver, but we are going to hydroplane, somebody's going to come barreling into us? What do you do in a situation like that?
Well, in that moment, I thought, oh, we're all going to die. Like, I don't.
Right.
But it was the moments that have been really impactful for me. I don't recognize it in that moment, right? Or I see something happening, but I don't understand it, rather, is the better way to say it, right?
Okay.
I have another story of losing my absolute mind on a driver because he like rolled through a stop sign and was like, what are you doing? Like, you're screaming at this poor guy who's trying to get to work over a stop sign. And so in that moment, I'm like, whoa, time out. What's going on? That moment with my daughter was one of those too, where I began to see it, but like doing the forensics on it, you're like, what is happening? What happened? What transpired before this? What led up to this? And it oftentimes the frustrating part is like, there's nothing that's obvious, right? But
yeah, it's not like there's a trigger. Right? A lot of times people, because when I'm in, I'll just tell my profession, sometimes my profession focuses on, well, when did this start? Okay, this started, you had this reaction in a car on this day. Well, what was happening right before that? And a lot of times the answer is nothing. Nothing significant happened, right? It winds up being learned behavior over and over again is what it is. And so there's not a triggering event.
And it's so often it's cumulative, right? Like, so for me, in my evaluation of it, I realized nothing had happened right before that. But how many times in my career had I gone to that accident, right? Dozens, where I would do, things that I would never share at home about what had to happen after an accident like that. And I was correlating or I was connecting my moment driving in that kind of situation to the potential. So that's the anxiety and the anxiousness that kicks in. Which is because I wasn't in control, right? So I'm imagining all these various scenarios that could happen because I'm not controlling it, because I'd seen it, right? And so that is for me is like when I have those moments, I think, okay, where have I shown up with this, or where has this have I had a similar experience in my life? And I can almost always identify, well, I've done that a lot on the job, or I've seen that a lot on the job. One of the things I tell people, like, don't watch the police videos on social media. Like, they can be used as training tools and they're good for briefing and that sort of stuff. But me personally, if I start doom scrolling the videos of an officer-involved shooting or a use of force or something like that, by the end of the first video, my heart rate's going, my breathing is shortened, and I'm activating my own hypervigilance state sitting on my couch, right? And so
not healthy. Right.
Not healthy at all. So you put that stuff away. There's a time and place to think about those things, deconstruct scenes, but it's not when you're with your family, when you're standing in line at the grocery store. Stay away from that stuff. Like that's like a simple explanation for how simple it is to activate this.
Yes. I think also, well, not a second part of this too is I would say that as a spouse, I think it's important to understand that aspect and to have understanding for it. As a spouse, I think what we do wrong or what families do wrong is we enable the behavior. Are you okay? What do you need? Those kinds of things, as opposed to encouraging two things. I think understanding of like, hey, this is a cumulative biological response from learned situations, right? So we have to look at it at like a biological response. And then I think we have to be open to, first of all, not personalizing it. So if I'm going to pretend I'm your spouse right now, and if I was your wife driving the car and you're having a panic attack, I could personalize that, or freaking out, right? I could personalize that and go, he thinks my driving sucks. He doesn't trust my driving, which a lot of times, 99% of what's happening is not about us, right? So really it's like, it's not whatever's going on with you is not because of me most of the time. So having curiosity, hey, what's happening right now? What are you experiencing is a really good question, rather than, but what comes out, I'll tell you what would happen in that conversation between my husband and I is he'd be, slow down. He would be telling me what to do in the situation. I would get annoyed because he was bossing me around instead of him having the awareness of like, oh, something's happening in my body right now. That's very like kumbaya statement, I think he would say, like, what's happening in my body right now? But getting curious. And then like, even if he did react to say like, slow down, I might say something like, hey, what's going on right now? What's going on with you? So there's ways that I think as couples, we can do that and to identify just little things. One thing that used to drive me nuts, and I used to think it was control, was my husband would text me and say, are you home yet? I'm like, you're at the PD. Why does it matter? You're not home. I can go around and do whatever I want to do. But I didn't understand that he's like, well, I think all these horrible things because I don't know if you're safe or not. It's just like all of that plays out as far as hypervigilance and what the conditioning is. Yeah, vast.
Oh, it's crazy, right? And it'll still show up, right? The work, it has to be something we're constantly aware of. Like to that exact example you just gave, my wife and kids left the house recently, like I don't know, 2 weekends ago. And within a couple of minutes, I hear a fire siren and an ambulance siren because, we know the difference. And I thought, what happened? And I have our dispatch CAD on my phone, on my work phone. And so I pull it up to see what's the description of the vehicles involved and sigh of relief because it's not their vehicle. And it's like one of those things that 99.5% of the population never thinks about. They hear a siren and they think it's someone else. And we protect ourselves by saying like, oh, they're just ignorant and they don't understand reality and the real world. And this is how the real world is. Well, yes, but would you rather go about your day happy until proven otherwise? Or do you want to be miserable until you're proven right? And so it totally shows up still. And one of the things I think you made a great point about spouses and not enabling it and addressing it. One of the best things my wife does is use some version of your phrase. And she figured this out on her own, but what's going on with you right now? So she's very direct and pointed to it. And I don't like the question. I'll be honest. Like, because like I said, this is a work in progress. I'm talking about it right here with you right now. I haven't, there's no like magic pill to get rid of it, but it's just being the awareness of it. But it's my cue to be like, okay, something's happening that I'm not seeing, right? I have stepped out of my own experience, my own body in some way that she's seeing something I'm not. And it's a good pause to think, okay, what is indeed going on? And more often than not, I can go, oh yeah, I'm a little short tempered, or I seem, I'm a little tight. I'm not giving the kids the attention. I'm blowing her off or something like that. Or I'm pretending to listen, but I'm not. Right. And so that question is challenging, but it's not confrontational, if that makes sense.
Yes, totally. I know that you mentioned that along the way you've had to do your own self-development, and that one of your passions and reasons for starting the podcast was because, like me, I think too, like you found out information and you wanted to share it. And I know that that is always something that's giving you purpose to help the community grow and change. I didn't write down your mission statement, but that was awesome. Uh, I know that you're moving into, or you're looking at a different way of helping the community and officers in general to look at things like hypervigilance and how it's impacting them personally and impacting their relationships, impacting their mental health. You mentioned the isolation, right? So isolating from people, it's like, well, people are dangerous. No, we got to get out there and do things, right? And I was talking about the muscles. So you're moving into a different way of helping people. And I know recently you started the academy. Do you want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, I'd love to. Thank you. So that retreat that we were talking about at the beginning of the show and seeing the impact and the powerful connection that guys were able to make in a couple of days, and how many times I heard over and over again that I didn't know I needed this, or realizing they were lacking that. And then, so that happened in November. And at the end of the year, I surveyed my audience and I said, what do you want out of the podcast or just life in general right now? Like, what are you struggling with? And almost 90% of my audience said some version of, I need a community. I want a community. I miss connection. I don't have friends and I want them. And so that disconnect between brothers and sisters and being at work, and like people feeling isolated and just not having a place that they can feel comfortable being themselves, was really apparent. And so I've had this in my head for years, but I wasn't quite sure how it would pan out or what it would look like. And then the beginning of the year really gained some clarity on it. And so I launched, the Academy, which is an online community forum for law enforcement personnel to get together, who are dedicated to their own self-development, their own personal development, and who want to learn how to mitigate things like hypervigilance. And so, in fact, this is our month where we're talking about hypervigilance within the academy and how it affects our relationships. And so one of the biggest challenges, and one of the things I learned out of the survey is that they listen to podcasts like ours because they don't know where to start. And they also get overwhelmed very quickly, right? And so I've been doing this for 10 years. You've been doing it for even longer, where we read the books, we do the work ourselves, we have talked to the experts on our podcast. So we have ourselves curated a ton of content, a ton of knowledge. And so the Academy is my way of saying, here's the things that I think you should focus on. And we're going to go out and talk with experts and learn about it together every month. And we're going to have activities through the month where you can really dive deep into a topic, whether it's hypervigilance or mindfulness or trauma or relationships or parenting or finances. So all of those things are in the pipeline for topics that we're going to be discussing in future months. And we do it by the month because we know we're busy. We are parents and spouse, and it's designed for active duty law enforcement. So it can be something that's done at 3 a.m. When you're on a slow night and you're sitting in the parking lot, or it can be done on your weekends or any of those things. So it's very flexible, but we're adding the community component to it. So there's lots of stuff out there where you can do video trainings, but there's nothing else out there that involves a community connection aspect to it. And so we're really trying to foster that and break this idea that we are doing it by ourselves. Because, I love your tagline is perfect. And it's a perfect example of this, right? Right. And the question I ask on the website, and I ask in person, I asked at the retreat, I ask in my surveys, how would your life change if you didn't have to do it alone? And you can almost always watch their shoulders drop and think, man, that would be so much better. Right. But we can't rely on our agencies. We can't rely on our partners. We certainly have friends. But one of the things we struggle with is still being seen as a cop in any of these kind of traditional civilian type membership groups, right? And so we are still reluctant to engage in those kinds of groups that are still very powerful. I mean, I work with one of them, Man Uncivilized, where civilians can connect and get deep into the weeds on their own self-development work. But as cops, we still hold back. We still think we're going to be judged. We still think they don't understand me. So I wanted to create something where there was that baseline understanding. Everybody in here is sworn, whether you're a cop, you're a dispatcher, corrections, custody, probation, but everybody in there has done the job in some way. Retired personnel are in there. People who were cops for just 10 years are welcome. If you've had some sworn capacity in your life, you're welcome to join. But it's meant to be curated just for those people so that there is a space where we can talk about things openly with other people who understand what we're dealing with, right? And
Yeah, they've walked the walk and not just talk the talk, right? It's they've walked the walk, and so you understand it when it's in your bones, and you do it day in and day out.
and there's something really powerful to just being seen by someone else who's done it too, right? I think that's really, really impactful. And it's something I think that we truly lack without realizing it. We have our buddies and we think that we can share it. And for a lot of people they do, but for a lot of people they don't. They're missing something out of it.
So community is a big part of this. How does that community stay private? Because I know that's probably going to be something that people will want to be like, well, do I need to be anonymous? How do I know that somebody's not going to take my whatever I'm saying and share it, right? There's some vulnerability in there, but also some privacy aspect. How are you going to navigate that? Because I know being open is hard and maybe, I don't want to say scary. That's not the right word, but
Yeah, no, it is
yeah.
scary. I think it is the right word,
So I'm curious
actually.
about that.
Like,
Okay. All right. Fine. Cool.
so there's a couple different ways we navigate that. The first is that we're not on social media. The group's not on Instagram. It's not a Facebook group. It's nothing that just can get copied and pasted up. So it's a dedicated website and app that we interact with each other on. The monthly calls, there's 2 monthly calls. We do a subject matter expert call on that month's topic at the beginning of the month, and then we circle back at the end of the month and do kind of an office hours Q&A discussion call. Those calls are recorded for everyone who can't make the actual live call because, again, we're thinking of working officers here.
Including you.
Including me, right? Yeah. But we encourage people to share their screen or their camera, right, so that they can get used to connecting and interacting like that. But we don't demand it. I understand. We have some people in the group who are undercover officers, and so they want to keep it off just for their own sense of safety. That's totally fine. There's nothing wrong with that. And so we encourage it, but we don't demand it. A lot of the work is sent also, is posted in the group, but it's stuff you do on your own, right? And so we send you out every week with either journal prompts or discussion points, things to think about. But those are really things that you can just do and you don't have to necessarily report back. There's 2 times every week that we do interact where you kind of put yourself out there, but it's intentional. And on Tuesdays, we do a 2-word check-in. We use the emotions wheel. Where are you at today? And just getting people to practice understanding where they're at in their physical presence, in their emotions for that day at that moment. Because I think that's one of the most powerful things I ever learned is being able to use 2 words to identify how I was feeling in that moment, good or bad, sad or mad, whatever, and then honoring that in some way to sound corny. But so we do that. And then on Fridays, we do hey, what was your win for the week and a lesson? And we try to encourage people. And the goal is to cheer people on, like, whether it was that your kids graduated this week or that you planned a family vacation or you had an operation at work go well, whatever it is. What was a win for the week? And was there a lesson that you could share that might benefit somebody else? So those are the 2 only times where we really ask people to interact. And again, no one's getting kicked out of the group for not engaging in that, but it's something we think is important that we practice, right? And the other aspect of it is we as cops have been ingrained that we're not special. You're not special compared to the next guy in uniform. We all look the same on, at work in the same uniform. And so we start to feel like we can't be proud of ourselves or talk about ourselves or feel good about some of the things that we've done. And this is like a light way to break some of that and be able to tell people like, I did good, and that comes with positive results as well.
And what I hear too is like, it's people that have that mindset of wanting to have that self-development or personal development, like you were saying, these are people that same mindset. And so it's going to be a community of people that want to balance things out, that want to change. And so it's not a community of, my mother used to say, looky-loos. It's not a community of people like just observing, like a Facebook group, which I think that was part of what I wanted to highlight, in the sense that this is private. This isn't something where people can drop in and just kind of like scroll and look through comments. It's going to be people that are of the same mindset. It's people that are jumping in because they want to grow. I actually love something that you have on the website, which is, it says, because burnout and negativity are not part of your job. And I read that when I first looked at this, and I went, oh, that's good. Because that to me speaks to so many, like, that's not why you did this. But unfortunately, it's kind of a result. And then that isolation. So you're addressing a couple different things. You're addressing, like, you're not alone, which addresses mental health, right? I think, in regard to the healthiness. And when I say mental health, I mean like physical health. You can work out in a positive way, right? You don't have to be sick to start working out and taking care of your body. It's the same thing with mental health. So yeah, community is a huge way of impacting that. And then I love the fact that you said about bringing on experts to talk. And so I think I love this product that you're putting out and changing the community in this way, because it's, like I said, it's a gap.
Yeah, thank you. And you're right. This is for people who are wanting to dig deeper and wanting a path forward. This is not, I had an agency call me and said, hey, is this something we could bring to our agency? And they wanted some specific metrics. And I was like, look, this is not for the guy or the gal who's asking, is OT authorized for me to watch the videos, right? This is for people who are actually wanting to put in the work on their own time and do the thing.
Yeah.
Because those are the people who are going to be successful. So yeah, everyone's surrounded by people who are in this process themselves, right? And the experts are a key part of this for us. And I'm so happy that you've agreed to be one of those experts. We call them the board of mentors.
Thank you for asking. Yes.
Top of the list, truly top of the list of people who I wanted to be involved in this. And these mentors are people in different areas of expertise that have agreed to, help us like vet some of the lessons and come on and teach some of these things and participate in the group Q&As at times. And so we have we have so many coming on board. Richard Gerling from Mindful Badge is one of my mindfulness experts and a good friend. Jonathan Montgomery from First in Nutrition, and so many people growing. And everybody who is on this board of mentors has a nexus to law enforcement and public safety. So it's not like I'm bringing in an accountant from my local accounting firm to talk about finance. We're bringing in cops who know cop finances and understand cop finances, as an example.
Yeah.
And so it really is about accessing people that we wouldn't be able to access otherwise, and being able to share that information together.
I'm just sitting here thinking, and I'm like, man, if we if Bobby and I would have had access to something like this early on, how different our relationship might have been. I mean, we all go through ups and downs, right? But just the idea of the financial aspect, the health aspect, the mindset aspect, just relationship aspect. There's so many, this career bleeds over in so many different ways. And people can access this, and you can fix it from the start, or you can impact it in the middle, right? There's no wrong time to start impacting it. But I hope people will access the information and be able to utilize it and spread the word, guys. We need to let everybody know that there is something out there, and that they can be educated and they can impact, and not be taken over by the career, if you know what I mean. I'm trying to think of how I want to say that. But I think part of it is that we allow the career to influence us, as opposed to influence how we want to live our life, and the career being a part of that. We have to be aware of the impact. And if we're aware of something like hypervigilance that you're even talking about this month, if we're aware of that hypervigilance, how do we start to, I always say, counter the impact is what I use. It's like, how do we exercise in both ways, and not just allow it to influence and negatively impact things. So,
yeah, the self-awareness is a huge step, but it's not the end step. The resolution is, how do you resolve it, right? So I can be aware that I'm being a jerk, but if I don't stop being a jerk, nothing changes, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely.
That's what we're trying to accomplish, is giving people tools to develop self-awareness, but then also transition into the resolution and solving it. Yeah, it's been really a lot of fun. It's been a great success so far with people jumping in and joining at whatever level they feel comfortable with. And so excited for this next chapter.
I am too. I mean, just looking at what all you're going to include here is going to be amazing. How do people, so do they go to the squadroom.net/academy? Is that where you want them to go, or?
Best place to learn more about it is the squadroom.net/the academy.
Perfect.
And they'll see everything there. They'll see the topics we cover. They'll see what we do every month. They'll learn a little bit more about me. And we're going to open membership for your group, for your listeners through July.
Okay.
And so would love to, share with people what we do. I know this is such a unique thing. This has never been done before, that there's a lot of reluctance or there's a lot of hesitation. And I want to assure people, we want to make sure that it's a right fit for you too. We're doing a 60-day money back guarantee.
What?
Because it is a paid subscription. Yeah, yeah. But I'm so confident that this is going to be right for the right people that
Yes.
I'm totally okay with this, because I didn't want to do 30 days and you like one topic and then
Right.
it resonates, but then the next month you're like, nah. The goal here is to develop a community of people who want to be there, who want to do the work. So yeah, 60-day money back guarantee. I'll refund both months if it's just not for you. We have monthly plans and we have annual membership plans. The annual membership plan, we offer basically 2 months free. It's 12 months for the price of 10.
Wow.
But we have flexibility with the monthly plan too, which is easier for some people. People who have questions about this can email me, Garrett@thesquadroom.net. I'll answer every question, and would love for people to go to that website to learn more about what we're doing. I truly think this is a game changer for how we move law enforcement personnel and lives and our families forward in the future.
Yes. I am I'm genuinely excited about this product because, and the whole community and what you're doing. I mean, you already impact the impact is already so great. And so to be able to do this, it's just amazing. And to do the retreat as well in 60 days. Hello, people, just sign up. Like, come on, 2 months free, go check it out. And guess what? It's cheaper than therapy. I will say that. I mean, why not get this than pay me for therapy? That's going to be the long run. Any kind of time you do self-development and you really get into it, it's going to be cheaper than doing the repair in the back end. So go in, check this out. I'm going to have all the links in the show notes. So if you're on your device, just click the show notes. You can always come back to this podcast. And when you're ready to, you can forward that to your email, or you can just click right there on your phone and get to all the links. I'll put Garrett's email in there. I will put the link to the Academy. I will also put the link to the Squad Room podcast, and you can give him a follow as well. What else do we need to know? I mean, that's like, gosh, y'all have a lot of action steps from this.
Well, we want to make it exciting and comfortable for people. So yeah, the 60 days, we have an on-ramp session of 5 different classes that are super simple, easy to handle or easy to do, that are just like our initial self-assessment of self-awareness trainings, all of that stuff. There's lots of stuff coming. When people do sign up, they get access to all of the past material, and that'll continue to grow as we launch. We just launched last month, so it's growing as we speak. Courses that'll be coming out in the future, there'll be discounts to that as well. There's a lot of stuff planned for the future of this, and that's why I'm excited about it and wants people to see this from the very beginning. Yeah.
Congratulations, because I know this is quite an endeavor, but I know that it's always something quality if it's coming from you. And so
thank you.
That's why I can always be like, yep, let's endorse. What are we doing here? So keep in mind also, we talked about hypervigilance. If you're wanting to also get on this month's lessons, I assume those are going to be recorded. Like if somebody's listening to this in December, are they going to be able to go back and look at those hypervigilance lessons too? So whenever you're
100%.
Yeah. So whenever you're listening to this, make sure you check out the hypervigilance lesson that Garrett has. But just keep in mind that even just you knowing that that spills over, and as a spouse, understanding how it spills over as well. Check out the Academy course. Check out the show notes below where you can get all of that information. Garrett, thank you so much again for coming onto the podcast. I love our conversations. And
I do too.
Thank you for
always
all
a pleasure.
Take care. All right, guys. Until next time, keep it all Code 4, and we'll talk to you later. Bye-bye. Don't forget to click that subscribe button on your device or get email updates by going to code4couples.com. While you're on the website, make sure you pick up my 71-page workbook and guide that goes with my book, The Essential Guide to Protecting Your Law Enforcement Relationship. Drop in the code podcast and download the workbook for free. Until next time, y'all, keep it Code 4.
Thanks for joining us. For more information about the podcast or Cindy, check out code4couples.com. All intellectual property rights owned by CRLD2 Ventures, LLC, are protected by the firm of 9mm, 45 ACP, 5.56mm, and 12 gauge.